Hey there, what's up? And welcome back to Common Knowledge, the show where I take a look at 10 common Magic the Gathering cards, and then I'll tell you if they're any good in the Pauper format or not. Going a little dark mode on here on my camera. Didn't want to turn on the big ring light because I don't know, it's a little harsh. So we'll just go dark this time. That'll work. Let's see what our first card of the day is. It is Hussar Patrol, which is 2 and Azorius mana, or white and a blue, for a 2/4 human knight with flash and vigilance. Not great. I come from a philosophy that when you are paying more colors of mana for a card with both with multiple color pips or with multiple pips of different colors, that card should be stronger than cards with only a single mana pip. I think that's a fair thing to have a philosophy for. I think it's something that Magic has gotten better about over time. You know, we've looked at some really old Legends cards that have been multicolor, and you go, there is no reason this should be multicolor. It's cards that are worse than Crawworm, but have more different colors of pips. And you go, why? Why is that? That's a harder thing to cast. Why would you make the card worse? And I bring that up because I think this is not a very good card. 4 mana for a 2/4. I don't care what else it has on it. Yeah, Flash and Vigilance they're fine abilities. They don't necessarily work all that well together, but I guess they're fine. This is not a very good card. And if I'm paying 2, a white and a blue for this multicolor card, I need to be better than the random 4-drop that white could play, or a random 4-drop that even green could play. I know green's kind of the color of big stomping monsters, but man, I'm having to build a deck in a certain way to be able to make 2 different colors of mana. That can be difficult. That is more difficult than making a monocolor deck, for sure. And so I should get something in return for that. And what do I get from this? A slightly decent French vanilla creature? That's not good. That's not nearly good enough here. You do get good art. I like that. But this is not a very good card. I'm not going to be very kind to it. I think we've gotten better about multicolor cards as we've gone into more modern Magic. I think especially the way they use these kind of signpost uncommon cards in obviously that doesn't matter for the Pauper format, but I really like the way we've gotten signpost uncommon cards as part of limited sets that then make a whole lot of sense. That, hey, these are powerful cards, and that's why we probably don't get as many common multicolor cards as we did before, because those are cards that for limited you kind of need to fill out different spaces, and common cards aren't as useful to be multicolor like that, because then they force you to go down specific lines. And the commons, those are cards that you are going to see more often in drafts and things like that, so you want them to be a little bit more flexible. Hybrid cards you're starting to see more at common because they're more flexible than multicolored cards. But we have a lot of multicolored cards in the format that are really, really good. Writhing Chrysalis. It's devoid, so it's no color, but also it's a Gruul card. And that costs the same amount of mana as this, and that card is just so much better than this card. And that's, man, I know it's unfair to point to a Modern Horizons 3 card, especially one that is a demon in this format, and then put it up against a basically random common from Return to Ravnica. But this should just be better. And it sucks that it's not better. I'm going to go for a, I don't know, 2.3 and be very disappointed. Early Winter is 4 and a black for an instant. Choose one. Either you exile target creature or target opponent exiles an enchantment they control. Not too bad. Black is starting to get better at taking care of enchantments. It's a very white and green ability, but This is becoming kind of more of a tertiary thing that black can do. And so we've been seeing a number of black cards that can do this, Writhing Torment or something to that effect. A couple other things that can take out enchantments, but there aren't a whole lot. So this is, in a very limited card pool of what things black cards can do, this can be pretty useful. I also like exiling target creature. That can be really good against a sneaky snacker. 5 mana is a lot. It is, and I think we're going to continue seeing relatively expensive, especially at common rarity, relatively expensive black enchantment removal, because they don't want black to be good at enchantment removal. They just want it to be possible in a way that it's not possible basically at all in red or basically at all in blue. So I don't know. There's a uniqueness to this card that you don't see very often in the format. So I could see somebody playing this in a sideboard if they really needed to get rid of an enchantment. But also it is pretty... It's not the best enchantment removal because it says target opponent exiles an enchantment they control. They get to pick. And that's not great. So if, this isn't going to be very useful against a Bogle's deck because they'll just pick whichever enchantment is the worst. They can get rid of a Utopia Sprawl or something and not get rid of the Ethereal Armor that you really need to get off the board, or the Ancestral Mass that really needs to get off the board. Exiling a creature at 5 mana is a lot, but I do like exiling at instant speed. This card's okay. It's not going in any of your decks, but even in a vacuum, this card is pretty solid, and I look forward to seeing more black cards that flirt with enchantment removal in more modern sets. So there's that to look forward to, but I think early winter is a little bit early in its usefulness. Let's go with I'll still go with like a 2.9. Good removal modal in that way. These are all good things, but the mana cost is just too much, obviously. Next up is Aerial Guide. 2 and a blue for a 2/2 Drake with flying. Whenever this creature attacks, another target attacking creature gains flying until end of turn. This is strictly better than a Windrake, which is, and probably playing off of Windrake a little bit in that it is a 3 mana 2/2 Drake. Because that's all the Windrake is. 3 mana, 2/2, flying Drake. So hey, that's what this is. But this is better because it has a little extra text here. And when it attacks, another target attacking creature gains flying until end of turn. That's not bad. That's never a terrible ability. I would say it's not an amazing ability either. It's pretty easy to interact with for the opponent. And it does require you to have extra creatures on the board. You still are paying for a Windrake here, even if it's a Windrake with a little gravy on top. That's not good enough for our format, but it's still a cute little card. I'll go ahead and give it a 2.4. Probably doesn't quite deserve that, but cute little card. Could go in a nice underpowered cube, something like that. Old Thrush, new card from The Hobbit. 2 colorless mana, or 2 generic mana. You can pay any mana for that. For a 1/2 flying bird, and when this creature enters, you gain 2 life, and you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, then shuffle and put that card on top. If this went into your hand, this card would be awesome. And I think you'd find a lot of people playing this card. It doesn't, though. It goes on top of your library, and that kind of tempo loss really is a killer. That's a real bummer. But the card itself still isn't too bad. 2 mana for a 1/2 bird with flying. That's not amazing stats, but it's decent enough stats. And any deck can play this. I like that. And gaining the 2 life is not nothing. This is certainly something that you could see in a bounce or a blink deck. Why not? Gains you a couple life when it comes into play, and you don't have to do the basic land search. It says it's a May ability, but if you did absolutely need the land on your next turn, I guess this does fix your draws in a way. Again, it would be busted if it went into your hand. And I kind of wish it did, because I would love to have a really cool card like this that any deck could play that would do that. I don't need it to go on the battlefield. I don't need this to be a rampant growth. That would be crazy. But I think if it went into your hand, like a lay of the land effect on the bird, maybe it wouldn't have to gain you life at that point. But I want this card to be better than it is, because I really like the card. But I don't think it's quite enough for the Pauper format. We did get another colorless card in The Hobbit that I think was very good, and probably should see Pauper play, if not will see Pauper play. So look forward to seeing that one on here at some point. But if you want to see what card I'm talking about, you can go to my most interesting cards of The Hobbit, or even the Pauper Buyer's Guide for The Hobbit, and see me rate all the cards, all the common cards from this set. So Old Thrush, I think, is cool. I don't know if it's good enough for Pauper, but I do think it's cool. And I will go ahead and give this something like a 2.7, I guess. I do really like it. I kind of wish I had played some copies in Limited, because I definitely had a deck that cared about landfall. I was in blue-green, and I think knowing that you were going to pick up a land the next turn with something like this out would have been somewhat useful. Next up, Wooded Ridgeline. We have done these lands before. I think I specifically did the Wooded Ridgeline of this cycle. This cycle is great. We see the cycle be played all the time in the Pauper format because it has the basic land types. Wooded Ridgeline specifically, it's a land, mountain forest, taps for red or green because it's a mountain forest, and it enters tapped. We've seen plenty of dual lands that enter tapped, and they're fine. There's lots of good flavors of them. Gain lands that gain you a life, the deserts that ping, all sorts of different kinds of lands that are dual lands, some that just enter tapped and didn't have land types at all. But these from Dominaria United, and we've even seen them in a couple of other Commander products, these are good. These now see pretty darn staple play in the Pauper format, because specifically you can search them up with the Lord of the Rings land cyclers. The 1-mana land cyclers there, because they can go find Generosent finds you a forest. This is a forest. It's attached to a mountain, but it's still a forest. And then you're just able to put that right into play. And yeah, it enters tap, but hey, that fixes your mana. Now you can go and search. You can be in some colors that you wouldn't necessarily be in, or you could just splash those colors, and you don't even have to play a ton of mountains, or if you're playing a red deck, a ton of forests. And you can just make sure that you go and grab one of these lands, throw it down, and now your mana's fixed. And that's pretty cool. That is really darn useful. These are great cards. They go in lots of different decks. They're right up there with the Kaldheim snow lands that have basic land types on them too. These, I think, generally are a little bit cheaper just because they're not snow lands, and also they're from newer sets, so they are more available sometimes than the Kaldheim Snowlands. But yeah, man, the Wooded Ridgeline is one of the better ones of these too, because it gets played in a lot of Gruul decks and Jund decks and other things like that. So this is a great card, and this is a great cycle. We've already scored these. I'm gonna just not mark this one off, but these are fantastic lands. I'd give them something like I don't know, like an 8. They are that good. They get played a lot. Metathran Soldier is 1 and a blue for a 1/1 Metathran Soldier, and this creature can't be blocked. It's fine, but we just have cards that are better than this at this point. We have, I can come up with a couple off the top of my head. Slitherblade. Slitherbraid's a 1-mana 1/2 that can't be blocked. So just better in basically every respect. More toughness, still has the same thing, costs 1 less. And we have other cards that can't be blocked. Not exactly the same thing, but pretty darn close. One of my favorite underrated Pauper cards, Woo Scout. Woo Scout! Woo Scout, whenever it shows up here, it's same mana cost for a 1/1 with Horsemanship, which functionally is basically unblockable. But when it enters, you look at your target opponent's hand, so that gives you a whole lot of extra information on a 1/1 unblockable body, which is just basically this, but with more gravy, and I like that. Especially in blue decks, where I would like to know what my opponent has in their hand, so I can then know what I should respond to and what I should let go. We just have better cards than the Metathran Soldier. I do like that it has the Metathran creature type. This has only been printed once, so we've never gotten to see another printing where they would actually have to put that. How many other Metathrans do you think there are in the format? Or not even in the format. What if we just go anywhere? Metathran. Oop, got to spell it right. Metathrans. If we just take a guess. I'll take a guess too. I don't think there's going to be very many. I'm going to say there's 7 total in all of Magic. 8. Oh, I was so close. And we had one in 10th edition. There you go. And here's one in Commander. But that's the Battle Mages. Those are from Invasion originally. Plane Shift. Damn. Yeah, I should have known that. Yeah, so 8 of them. Not very many. And even fewer playable in Pauper. There's 3 of them playable in Pauper. These don't seem very good. And this one specifically, I mean, it's fine. I have a commander deck that is all about playing unblockable creatures that is mono blue, and it doesn't play this card because we just have a bunch of other cards in blue that can't be blocked that are much cheaper than this, or better stats than this for the same mana cost. It's okay. I'll go for like a 2.5. I think that's pretty normal. I mean, certainly you could load this thing up with auras, make it real big, put a bunch of +1/+1 counters on it, swing in, and your opponent can't block it. But it doesn't have hexproof, so it's gonna or shroud. Well, I guess if it had shroud, that would be a real problem for you as well. But it doesn't have hexproof. It doesn't have any protection whatsoever against the opponent. So it probably just gets removed pretty easily. But again, if you wanted to play this kind of effect, Slitherblade is right there and has a whole lot of extra advantages over this. So not something all that necessary, but 2.5 is a decent enough score for that. Death's Approach is a single black mana for an enchantment aura that enchants a creature. Enchanted creature gets -X/-X, where X is the number of creature cards in its controller's graveyard. Could be pretty useful. This is a format where we see a lot of black decks, whether it's mono black sacrifice or dredge decks or spy decks, more specifically, that put a lot of creature cards in the graveyard. And so for 1 mana, it's sorcery speed because it's an enchantment aura, but still 1 mana to give a creature -X/-X, that gets around any indestructible stuff that you might deal with. Not something you deal with a lot in this format, but enough that it can happen where it can be nice to have this. This is a pretty cool card. Now, there's also a lot of graveyard hate in the format, a lot of graveyard removal spells and abilities here, Bajuka Bogs and Relic of Progenitus and all sorts of things like that, Fairy Macabre. And this being sorcery speed does give your opponent a really big opportunity to use a lot of those different kinds of effects and make this card pretty useless. But if you already are all in on the graveyard with some kind of dredge or spy deck, I don't know, why not? Why not play a really cheap removal spell? That could be pretty useful. I kind of like this card. I want to give it a good score. I am gonna give it a score. I'm gonna give it like a 3.8. I think it's kind of right up there. I understand the issues that it has, but pretty good. You could even put this on a creature early when you don't have many creatures in the graveyard, because it'll just stick, and then as you put more creatures in the graveyard, it gets smaller and smaller. You put this on a Solarian Terror. That's actually an interesting idea. You put this on a Solarian Terror for 3 mana because you got to pay the ward, and then you just put up a bunch of creatures that are going to chump block the Solarian Terror. But every time one of your creatures chump blocks the Solarian Terror and goes to the graveyard, the Solarian Terror gets a little smaller, and eventually you're not going to have to chump block it. They won't attack with it because now they might lose it. That's cool. I like that until they, exile your graveyard. But until then, I don't know. It's it can be, you could even put this on a creature and then start dredging a bunch of other things into your graveyard or milling yourself, self mill, and maybe you'll hit enough creatures to make it work. So I mean, it's certainly not the most efficient removal spell in the world. It does take a lot of other resources to make it good. But I think we're in a format and have enough decks that care about the graveyard and filling up the graveyard that you could make this work. I like it. Yeah, 3.8. Maybe even higher, honestly. I could totally see the scene play. Good card. Floating Shield is 2 and a white for an enchantment aura that enchants a creature. As this aura enters, you choose a color. Enchanted creature has protection from the chosen color. This effect doesn't remove this aura. And you can sacrifice this aura to give target creature protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. And it also has it's misprinted with a low resolution pixelated art. So that kind of sucks. What do we think about this? It doesn't have flash, which is the real thing you see on a lot of these auras with protection. You kind of need that because you're giving your opponent a lot of time to respond to this at sorcery speed, like we were just mentioned with other auras. So you could even try protecting your creature from this, and then your opponent just blows it up anyway. That'll always feel bad. So you kind of need to play this when your opponent's already tapped out. You already have to have a creature on the board. You're spending 3 mana to put this on the board. It's only protection from one color, so if your opponent is in a multicolor deck, maybe they can still do stuff against this. You know, if they're playing black and green, well, okay, they can't use their cast downs now because you named black, but they can still use fight effects, and that can be difficult for you. I guess as long as they're using a non-black creature for the fighting. Yeah, I don't know. I think from you could see this going into a Bogle's deck or a mono white heroic deck, but those decks have better / faster forms of protection. I like that it doesn't remove this aura, so you could say your creature has protection from white, but it only doesn't remove this aura. It doesn't. It would remove the ethereal armor and the. I'm trying to think of other white auras that actually get played, but I'm not coming up with any. So I'll say Holy Strength, which is absolutely not in those decks. A cartouche of Solidarity, I think, is the white one. Yeah. So it would remove those, but it wouldn't remove this. The sacrifice, the Floating Shield is pretty good though. I do like that, as it does give you protection from a second color at that point. So your opponent's already not going to target this with cast down because it has protection from black maybe. But then they're in a Rakdos deck, so they try to lightning bolt your creature. Well, okay, hey, that's a red spell, so I can sacrifice this aura, say it has protection from red, and then now I don't have to worry about the red spells. You know, maybe they play cast down then, or maybe you have a position where your opponent, you've said, hey, I have protection from black, but your opponent has a bunch of red creatures on the board now, and you need to swing in for that last little bit of damage. Well, I can sacrifice the aura and say, well, now I have protection from red. I can't be blocked by all these red creatures, and now I can just swing in for the win. There are things you can do with this card, and I like that. I like the, not modality exactly, but at least the versatility this card offers. But 3 mana and no flash speed really makes it difficult to find a real use case for it. That's too bad. Let's go with a 3. Demystify. We were just talking about Demystify. Was it last episode? Maybe 2 episodes ago? Because I was talking about the charms specifically. Piety Charm, I think, is the one I mentioned. Let's look at this Onslaught art because it's just better. I love the Onslaught Cleric so much, and I think they look awesome. So we got a couple new arts. Ooh, I kind of like this Rise of the Eldrazi art. That looks nice. This Ixalan art, not as interested in. Hey, I mean, it looks fine, but This is my art right here. Demystifies a single white mana for an instant. Destroy target enchantment. Clean, simple. You know exactly what it does. This is not great because it's too narrow. You know, we talk about. I feel like there's a spectrum of Magic cards, and on one end, you've even heard me complain about it today, as I talked about that Bloomburrow card that exiles an enchantment or exiles a creature. That sometimes we get too generalized, and we get too, or not too generalized rather, but too versatile. Hey, this thing has multiple modes, and because it has multiple modes, well, you have to pay a little extra mana, and at some point, you're going to have enough different effects on a card that it requires a certain mana cost, and that mana cost is now too expensive to make any of the modes all that useful. And so we don't play those cards because they're too expensive. You know, it does a big splashy effect, or it can do multiple little splashy effects, but when put together, that's too expensive, and we can't play that now. Or maybe it's a really general effect, but to get the really general effect that hits, you know, if it's an exile target, you know, that there we can do that as an example. Scour from Existence is the other card I'll put here. So you have Scour from Existence on one end of the spectrum. This is only played in a single deck in Pauper, and it's a Tron deck. And it's because Tron's the only thing that can make this mana. But the idea here is this is a colorless card, so any deck can play it. It's all generic mana here. But it has a really good effect. Exile target permanent. Sweet. That's so general. It's so open on what I can do with it. It's at instant speed. I really like that. All of these things, like, this is a fantastic card. And then you look at the mana cost and go, well, my deck can't play that. That's 7 mana. That would take my whole turn to get that much mana in the first place. If I'm not playing Tron, it takes me, you know, the whole game. I can't hold up that much mana and profitably do something with it. Like that, this isn't worth it to me. Even though this effect is great. You look at that text and you go, oh boy, exile target permanent? I could always use that. I can get rid of an opponent's land, I can get rid of an enchantment, I can get rid of whatever. Sweet. That's fantastic. So that's one end of the spectrum. Amazing effect, amazing speed of the effect. Cost is way too high to be played. And then here's the other end of the spectrum, which is extremely narrow effect, really small, just targeting enchantments. Single white mana, super cheap. Instant speed, yeah, that's fine. Whatever. It's a really good speed. But those are the two ends of the spectrum. This one is too cheap and too narrow, whereas Scour from Existence is too general and too expensive. There is a sweet spot somewhere that's probably closer to Demystified than it is to Scour from Existence. But that's when you start getting cards like Naturalize or Disenchant or all the different versions of those cards that say, okay, well, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Now I have a couple of options of what I'm hitting. And that hits a much wider swath of what can show up in this format. And yeah, we'll pay 2 mana for that. Same speed, instant speed. But now I can pay 2 mana. 2 mana is fine. It's still cheap enough where I can put this into my deck and have that mana held up to be able to use. But if I knew that I was just going up against Bogles that's not playing any artifacts, I'd prefer to have the Demystifies. But that's only if I knew that ahead of time. And I don't really have enough room in my sideboard of 15 cards to be able to play a bunch of very specific effects for just one real deck. I need those sideboard slots to go into cards that can handle multiple different decks. So if I'm going up against an artifact deck, an affinity deck, then I want to be able to hit artifacts. If I'm going up against Bogles, I want to be able to hit enchantments. And a card like Disenchant, which doesn't get played in the format, this is just an example of a card that hits multiple things, that has more room in my sideboard because I know I can pull it out in different forms. I guess Revoke Existence is probably something that gets played more in the Pauper format as a sideboard card. There you go. Sorcery speed, but it exiles target artifact or enchantment, and that can make a big difference. You get it off the table completely. So these are difficult choices that we have to make. Enchantments are not as heavy in this format as artifacts are. So you will see cards like Siege Smash, which can destroy just artifacts. You will see Suplex, which destroys artifacts. Now those are still modal cards that can do other things, and that's why those are better than just say Shatter, which we've looked at on the channel before as well. But since we really only see this really only see enchantments in Bogles or White Heroic, and then we'll still see some every once in a while. There'll be the Nyxborn Hydra in Elves and lots of other things that will have specific enchantments in them, but they might not have specific enchantments enough. They might not have enough enchantments in those decks for you to care about just bringing a card in your sideboard that destroys enchantments. If the meta shifts in such a way that enchantments are everywhere and the decks, the top of the meta is all enchantment decks, absolutely Demystify would show up as a card that you play. But we're not in that meta right now. And the meta that we're in requires you to either be more artifact heavy, because those show up a lot more, or at the very least can hit artifacts or enchantments. Or other things. Maybe it's a card that does a lot of other things, but also can take out an enchantment. That's what a Thraben Charm does, right? That'll be the last one of these we look at before we move into a new card. But Thraben Charm here also destroys target enchantment. That's what a Demystify does. But it also can exile graveyards. It also can kill creatures. And at 2 mana instant speed, I'll pay 2 mana to have a Demystify as one of my modes. But I'm not going to pay 1 mana to have Demystify be the only thing I can do. So this is a good card, and it is a little bit meta dependent, but most of the time, we have decided this card is not good because it is too narrow, even though it is extremely cheap. And that argument, that shift will continue to take place as we continue to move into different cards. A Null right now is a really good counterspell because it gets used on both enchantments and artifacts, but it's a very specific kind of counterspell, different than, paying double blue for counterspell that counters any spell. Things to consider, but Demystify in this meta right now is just too narrow and not good enough to see real play, because it just kind of does the one thing, and it does it well, but that one thing is not something we really need in the format right now, and maybe not ever. So I think it's going to end up getting a I really don't want to go under a 2.5. Yeah, I'm just going to go with a 2.5. Let's get back to our random search here. What do we got? We should probably finish pretty soon. I've been rambling on for quite a bit. We have a couple cards left. Patriarch's Desire is 3 and a black for an enchantment aura that enchants a creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/-2. And it also has Threshold. Enchanted creature gets an additional +2/-2 as long as there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard. Oh boy. This one I don't like nearly as much. Yeah, it is, I guess, in a way modal, or in a way has variety, in that I could use this as a pump spell for my own creature, as long as my creature has more than 2 toughness. Or I could use it as a removal spell against an opponent's creature if that creature has 2 or less toughness. Or, the Threshold thing, which is, as we talked about, pretty easy for black decks to mill into a bunch of cards into their graveyard, hit Threshold, and now, that you're getting +4/-4. Yeah, okay. I can see decks that might be able to take advantage of this. Creatures with trample that I can put this on of mine that are really big, and now they're even bigger. In a Tron deck, which you're definitely not playing this card in, but if you did and somehow were able to put a bunch of cards in your graveyard as well, a Boulder Branch Golem wears this quite well. It turns a 6/5 trampling Boulder Branch Golem into a 10/1 Boulder Branch Golem with trample. That's pretty good. That's hard for an opponent to deal with. You can put it on an opponent's creature and turn their, whatever's got 4 toughness into a dead creature. great. Or, you put it on a Solarian Terror, which you wouldn't because that costs way too much. Let's say a Cryptic Serpent, and it makes that Cryptic Serpent into a 10/1 with no trample. So you can at least block it and trade with a little 1/1. Okay, there's some stuff you can do with that. The real problem is it costs 4 mana. That's the biggest problem, and it's I can almost get around the other hurdles of, it's going to be kind of okay or kind of bad in a lot of different situations, but it's always going to be bad to pay 4 mana for this effect. I don't think you're ever going to feel good about that. So I gotta give it a pretty bad score, something like a 2.2, I think, and move right along to our 10th card of the day. It's Ojutai Interceptor. 3 and a blue for a 3/1 bird soldier with flying, and it's got Megamorph for 3 and a blue. So you can cast this card. I think this is the first time we've done a Megamorph card. Maybe not. But you may cast this card face down for a 2/2 creature for 3 mana. That's like Morph. But you can turn it face up at any time for its Megamorph cost, and get this. Put a +1/+1 counter on it. Wow. Megamorph, I think, is, and I believe Mark Rosewater's even admitted this, it's just one of the worst received mechanics in Magic. And it's not that it's bad, but you get a word like Megamorph, and you think, whoa, this is gonna really do something when it flips over. And just getting a +1/+1 counter, that's it. That's all the Megamorph does. It's not even the way that you have Mobilize 2 or trying to think of other ones that have multiples on them. But we have mechanics that have a number next to them, and then you get more. I just had one. Support 4 or something that allows you to put 4 +1/+1 counters on something. If we got Megamorph 5, and then I could, when I flip this card up, then I got 5 +1/+1 counters on it. Maybe that would help, but that's just not the way Megamorph works. So here's the deal. You get a 4 mana 3/1 flying bird. That's bad. That's a really bad stat line for 4 mana. Or you pay 3 mana and then another 4 mana. So now you're paying 7 mana for a 4/2 flyer. That's also bad. These are bad cards. You can try to argue, and I know it's my favorite word that you're probably sick of. Take a drink, I guess, but you could argue that this is modal. Okay, it's a 3/1 at one point in the game for 4 mana, or I pay a total of 7 mana and I get a 4/2. And hey, that could be better in the late game to get a 4/2 flyer. Maybe you're going to be dead before you get to do any of this stuff. This card sucks. It's still just 1 toughness. I mean, I guess it's 2 toughness if you Megamorph it, but yuck. I really don't like Megamorph. I think Level Up and Megamorph are kind of right next to each other for me, of just terrible mana, so mana inefficient, I think, for what they do. And they really bum me out. I'm going to give this a 1.7. And that score, the 0.7 is really only because it's got high power and it flies. I guess this could do a bunch of damage because it has some sort of evasion on it, but oof. Bad card. I don't like it at all. Let's do a bonus card and then get out of here. Our bonus card is Octoprophet, which is 3 and a blue for a 3/3 octopus, and when this creature enters, you scry 2. Normal card. Same mana cost as that Ojutai Interceptor, but this is a 3/3 instead of a 3/1. Doesn't fly, but the enters trigger with the scry 2 is well, it's not great. It's definitely not great. This is just giant octopus, right? But without the scry, or with the scry. Yeah, giant octopus is the same thing. So same mana cost, same power and toughness. So I'm guessing this is especially because it started in a core set, I'm guessing this is a play off of giant octopus. But here's how much Magic has evolved since Portal. Or since when we played this in 9th edition, that when it was last printed. And now we've moved into Core Set 2020, and we went, well, it's the same card, but now it's got Scry 2 on it. Okay, it is just a hill giant with Scry 2, and that's pretty bad. We'll give it a 2.1. That's it for today. Fun card to end on, even if it's not a very good card. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.